Welcome to Season 4 of the Knack 4 Business Podcast.
Today's show is brought to you by our K4B Profit Snapshot. Here's one question worth sitting with. If you stepped away from your business for 30 days, would it grow or contract? That answer tells you a lot about where you really stand. Try the free 5-minute snapshot. It measures process, profit, and personal freedom. Link is in the show notes.
So from an audience perspective, how can you create real human content without burning out or sounding like a robot? That's what our guest will talk about. How coaches and business owners can use AI to keep their true voice, save hours every week, and turn posts into clients instead of noise. If you're tired of guessing what to write and doing everything yourself, this episode will show you a simpler way. Listen in and learn how to make content that connects, builds trust, and actually converts. Our guest today is Louis Swart from Ironbridge. He is a seasoned business coach for coaches and founder of Ironbridge, a human AI-powered virtual assistant company that helps coaches avoid burnout and build self-sustaining businesses. With over 35 years of experience building and selling companies, managing over more than 450 staff, and training coaches worldwide, he specializes in teaching effective delegation and growth strategies. He's also a published author and was a top 50 finalist in the Next Top Speaker competition, and he speaks internationally to help individuals reclaim their time, profitability, and peace of mind. It's an absolute pleasure having you here today. Thank you so much for joining us. Do you have a favorite quote or saying you want to share?
Well, let's just get it done. I think we can do so much learning. Everybody, you can go on YouTube and there's a million things you can learn, but how much of it are we actually getting done? How much are we actually implementing? Because that's where the trick is.
That's true. So your backstory, what was the moment you realized coaches were burning out from trying to do everything themselves? It almost sounds like the one-man klaxon show where you have the drums and the monkey just joining in just for the odd entertainment value. When was the time that you realized, hang on, you guys are burning out? Like what was the epiphany?
Well, I'll tell you my story if that's okay.
Yeah.
Pretty much when I was 30, I just sold a business for 5 million. It was a business my brother and myself had. We had 200 staff. And I remember sitting in the bank and they were counting out the money on one of those machines, like grrr, and then put an elastic band and grrr. Amazing feeling, I got to tell you. But I was sitting there and I was thinking about the businesses that I'd had before and why this one had been so successful. And 5 years before, I had a plumbing business and I had 10 plumbers. And, I was 25, bulletproof 10 plumbers. I thought, man, I'm going to sell this business and retire. And I went to a broker and I said, hey, I want to sell my plumbing business. And he said to me, Louis, who does the accounts? And I'm like, well, I do it. And who does the quality control? I do it. And who does the quoting? Well, I do it. And I. And he said, Louis, your business is worth nothing. And I still to this day remember that kind of sinking feeling of I had this thing that I thought was worth all this, money, but it was worth nothing. And he said, because I've got to find another Louis who knows how to do plumbing, knows how to do accounts, knows how to do all these things to be able to buy the business and who wants to work the crazy hours that you work. And so the next 5 years, I literally just focus on delegation. How do I delegate? How do I get everybody to do everything for me? So when it came to selling the next business, they were like, who does the accounts? Who does this? Who does that? It was one of those, just fingers pointing in every different direction. And literally the guy just said, I'll get 4 other people and each of them come up with $1 million. And that was the deal done because it was very easy for them to step in and just take over. Immigrated to Australia, had some epic fails, some awesome wins. The last business that I had, we grew it over 8 years to turning over sort of 35 million, 450 staff, like a really big thing with using all the delegation stuff that I'd learned before. But then I got to a point where I felt kind of empty, and I know if you talk to a lot of entrepreneurs all the time and they get to that point where you feel empty and you go like, man, I've reached this kind of level and I really should be happy, but I wasn't happy. And so I felt like I was broken, and I was like, man, I got to just fix this. And so, having always done businesses, I was like, well, I'll treat it like a business. Okay. I'll go in and I'll find all the people that can help me, and I'll um, get them to help me. And I went in and I studied NLP, neuro linguistic programming, became an NLP master practitioner. I became a hypnotherapist, a timeline therapist. I became all these different modalities to try and fix me. So I spent about 2 years, like really just intensely working with all these different people. And the one thing that I realized through this whole thing was that most of these people who were salt of the earth, just, such beautiful people, they were really just out there to help others. They were all just kind of eking out a living. Most of them had a second job to support their kind of, coaching hobby, or they were eating into their savings, hoping that one day they'd get that big break. And so it seemed like such a massive difference between corporate, where it's just like bang, 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 and then people that are actually trying to really, really help others, suffering. And so then I felt like, well, if I can go out and actually help people with all the stuff that I know from having run businesses and all the mindset stuff that I know, because I mean, a lot of it is mindset, then I can really uplift that whole community to be able to, you know, help more people, because one of my highest values is helping people. And if I can help a person who helps people, it's kind of, along the lines of just duplicating what you can do, and leverage. So, yeah, so that's kind of how I got into it.
Wow. NLP is kind of an interesting thing. I mean, it's um, interesting that the experience like owning a plumbing business, right? And then you realize, being the source of truth for all things is not good, because you can only carve yourself up so many times. Would it have made sense, and in retrospect, looking back, that if, let's say, to sell the plumbing business, not to sell it just to a competitor and have them absorb it? And they would have just, because they would have already had a Louis for the accounting, a Louis for the sales piece. It just would have given them more territory? Or is it, did it require the source of SOPs, standard operating procedures built around everything? It wouldn't have mattered whether, because you didn't have that.
Well, I sold it for the equipment, basically the equipment value. So I sold it for what the equipment was worth and everything, because yeah, you didn't have the people to sell with it. So the idea was that when we sold the second business, a manager, an investor could just step in and actually take over. Whereas the first business, it wasn't quite the same. But I understand your concept with bigger organizations to just absorb the small guys and then just bring them under the pool. But it's, your multiples are so much less if,
Yeah.
if you're getting absorbed by somebody big, it's just literally they're just buying you out for what your stuff's kind of worth.
Would you have found that in that particular path, and maybe franchising might have been the way to go? There's a gent down in Florida that we were chatting with. He says, someone has a business, they got it all down, and then they franchise it, because at the end of the day is, how do I scale this? And
Mm.
it can be scaled and it can be sold, right? And so franchise is kind of an easier way, so you don't literally have to be everywhere. You do have to have some more manpower. So would franchising have been an option too?
I'd already started another business, and so I was pretty much out of that business, but I'd already started something else. I was doing plumbing, and then the business that I started with my brother was we did public telephones, and so it was a completely different type of business.
That was just a change of pace from
Yeah, look, I
water
mean,
from water to telecom. Yeah.
yeah, and also, I realized that the demand was much bigger in the demand was much bigger in the telephone space. And it wasn't as much. It wasn't as labor intensive. You weren't chasing money. Plumbing, you're chasing money. You're constantly chasing money.
It sounds like a very, this is going to be a bad pun, a very fluid dynamic. Sorry about that. So neurolinguistics, what brought that into the gameplay of, because obviously you're not hypnotizing your clients or your staff, but how did it become a tool that you could leverage to help succeed?
We all actually do NLP techniques. We all already do those techniques. We all already do hypnosis techniques. It's something that we naturally born with, that we do. All that they're doing with the training is they're really just enabling you to enhance it. So, for example, I give an example. We do a thing called reframing. So, your child doesn't want to go to school. They're like, I don't want to go to school. I don't want to go to school. Like, everybody doesn't love me, doesn't like me at school. And then you say, isn't your best friend Johnny going to be there today? And they're like, oh, yeah, Johnny's going to be there. And you go, Johnny likes you. And they go, yeah, Johnny likes me. And then off they go, You've reframed the child's perception. Okay. The same with a client. The client goes, oh, look at, spending $5,000 is really expensive for me at the moment. And you will say something like, well, this kind of investment, do you think that this investment's going to help you long term? You've reframed it. So you've taken their thought and you've given them back the exact same thought, but with a twist on it, right? Just looking at the world in a different perspective. So we do that. We all do that. But really, by learning NLP, you learn why it works and how you can actually enhance the way that works. And in NLP, they got some cool stuff like Milton models where you do some stuff like, what if you didn't not do that? What would happen? And it's meant to mess with your brain, What if you did run a podcast? What if you didn't run a podcast? What if you did not run a podcast? What if you did do a podcast? And it kind of it really messes with your brain because you kind of going, well, if I didn't not do that, what would happen? And it kind of it brings out a whole different level of thinking. Now, in my coaching, or when I'm helping business owners, I can actually just slip in these techniques. So I can just reframe something for people, and reframing is super powerful. I can just reframe something for them. I can slip in a Milton model where I can ask them, well, what if you didn't not do this? Then what would happen? And you kind of, they have a thing called pattern interrupt, where we're all going through the world, and then suddenly you see something and you're like, ding, this is different. You're just walking down the street and you see a purple elephant and you go, well, okay, that's different. And it's called pattern interrupt. And the idea is we want to stop them and then go, okay, this is what I want to tell you. And so there's all these things that you learn in NLP, and then, with the hypnotherapy, I know that when I first thought about it, when I grew up, hypnosis was like, oh, it was like, you'd been overtaken by evil spirits type thing. But the reality is that it's just moving your brain into a different state. When we're going to sleep, we go from the super active state down to a lower state. And then in that lower state, we're more susceptible. So in hypnosis, they use the example where they say, close your eyes. And what I want you to do is I want you to think of, you're walking into your kitchen and there's a big lemon. There's a big juicy lemon on the counter. Okay. And then you cut open the lemon and then I want you to just take the lemon and then just squeeze it into your mouth. And most people actually get saliva in their mouth, or they're like, oh, they get that
Yeah.
that thing. And really that's hypnosis. That person has been hypnotized. Okay. Because you've invoked that additional saliva, or you've invoked that feeling just by telling them some words. And that's all that hypnosis is. It's exactly the same thing. You literally just, people are more susceptible to receive information. Like for smoking they do the same thing. And it's kind of like, you get them into this really, really relaxed state. And then you go, okay, so, what would your life look like in 10 years' time if you keep smoking? and you kind of telling them, what about lung cancer and all the terrible things that could happen to them that they've told you about previously, and then what would your life look like if you didn't? And then you tell them all the beautiful things that they told you they wanted to achieve. And their brain actually starts creating this future path, which is really where they end up going. And amazing. And it's not, there's no hooblum gooblum to it. It's
Yeah.
literally, yeah, it's literally just a science. So
Fascinating. So you're employing this as part of the coaching techniques for people. So you're kind of gearing them up. And earlier we were talking about in the intro that you're helping them get past, leveraging tech and content, and and I guess what the end of the day is, there's a race. If you're, almost like you're operating under the veil of scarcity, all right, then
mm,
everything is, a problem, as opposed to, reframing it, from the other
yeah,
perspective. So how do you get folks to kind of like, okay, chill? I mean, if there's an elephant to be eaten, it's one bite at a time, as the story goes. But if you have to manage that elephant and have to get it consumed sooner, how do you make that kind of phase in? How do you bring that about?
great question. Great question. So I find a lot of people are super scattered with where they want to be. Um, they're like, oh, I need to do this and this and this and this and this and that and that other thing. And then you go, okay, tell me where you want to be in 5 years' time. And they're like, I'm not quite sure. I want to be successful, which is a terrible thing, because successful doesn't really mean anything. Successful to you might be, I get to spend, 8 hours a day with my children. Successful might be, I'm got 50 Lamborghinis in the garage. It doesn't, it means different things to different people. So, unless they start doing the SMART goals, and so many people don't actually know where they want to be in 5 years. So many people haven't got that big picture. And so it's like that Alice in Wonderland. She's walking along the path, and then she gets to the tree and she says to the Cheshire Cat, which way should I go? And he goes, where are you going? And she says, I don't know. And he goes, well, then you can go either way. And it's literally that, so people are scattered. They're doing a lot of busyness without actually focusing on what the big picture is, where they want to be. So once we get clear on where the big picture is, then we can say, okay, these are the kind of steps that we've got to do to get to the big picture. And then, start working on those one at a time. And I think a lot of coaching is really just bringing people back in again, saying, hey, we don't need the logo right now. We need to kind of work out where we want to go first. We don't need to spend all our time on the app, on the logo for the app. Let's work out, what is the app actually going to do? Who's it actually going to help? And then that helps us to go forward. So yeah, it's really just bringing it in. And somebody was saying that two of the people that have got the most singular focus were Steve Jobs and Elon Musk. And literally, they've got this like absolutely singular focus. If anything's outside of that focus, they're not interested. And lots of people think, oh, to focus means that I really need to focus on what I should be doing. And it's actually, you should be focused on what you shouldn't be doing. So it's easy to focus when something's easy. Like, okay, I need to, I'm busy writing a book and I need to write my book. And then a party comes up, and it's a party for a family member or something. Okay. Real focus is when you say, hey, I've actually dedicated, I've got to write this book. I'm not going to attend that event because I'm going to write this book. That's singular focus. Okay. As opposed to us going, okay, I'm going to spend more time writing my book. So it's really getting rid of those things that aren't in line with where you want to be.
So when you're working with a client to bring them to the home stretch, and focus on stuff, but not I guess, so narrow that you forget that you got to eat, right? Like it's almost
Mm,
like if someone, just if you totally ignore your own internal signals, right? You don't sleep, you don't eat, and
yeah.
eventually you fail. How do you get a balance in that? And then at the same time have them bring out their own core message? Because I can find, three different folks in the same business, but three different personalities.
Mm,
Somewhat close. Let's say if you're talking accountant, they'll be usually detail oriented. But at the same time, different personas. Like,
mm,
how do you get them to deliver their core message so that it stays true? Because if they're trying to reach somebody, right, and
mm.
how do you get them to hit the mark?
Well, once again, we've got to work out what that mark is. So when we work on our 5-year goal, Tony Robbins has got that wheel of life. And so when you're telling me what your 5-year goal is, some of the questions may be, well, where do you want your relationship to be? Where do you want your spirituality to be in 5 years? Where do you want your health to be? Because, like you said earlier, some people will go, oh, I want my business, I want to be able to buy a Ferrari in 5 years. And then they'll just work and then they will completely sacrifice their health. And when they're sacrificing their health, they get halfway to the Ferrari and then they realize that they've got to spend all their money to fix up their health because they've been eating like terribly. So it is about having that balance, but the same rules apply. We've got to know what the 5-year goal is. And I kind of think of it like eat the elephant. You walk up there and there's a whole herd of elephants and you go eat the elephant. You can't just start having a bite of each elephant. You've got to kind of go, well, okay, that's the elephant that we're going to eat. Like, that specific one. Um, and that's what lots of people aren't doing that. And especially now because we're so bombarded with, you pick up your phone and it's, oh, I can help you do this. Oh, I can help you do this. Oh, I can help you write a book. I can help you become a speaker. I can help you do affiliate marketing. Oh, don't do affiliate marketing. Do Amazon marketing. Hey, I can help you to just make money. I got 1 million followers last week just from, being sexy. I don't know, whatever. And it's all these, I can help you do, and we kind of get distracted. And I find even with a lot of coaches is they've got 10 programs that they're in. And they're so snowed under just trying to keep up with these 10 different programs that they're not actually doing anything in their world. And I'm not saying that it's, that they're not going to benefit in the long run from this, but, do one. Every time you go into a meeting, you need to walk out of the meeting and say, what's one thing that I learned? What's one thing that I can apply? Otherwise that meeting wasn't beneficial.
Are you finding that even with the advent of AI, so if someone is fire hosing themselves, for lack of a better word, how do you get them to narrow down then enough? And if they're capitalizing on AI, it's also, they start relying on as a resource maybe too much. Where do you start building out the boundaries so that you stay on the mark? You kind of follow the pulse. And obviously, if you realize, for example, if accounting is not your thing, right, just hand it off to someone that does the books, right? That
Mm.
way, the tax agency doesn't look at you with the evil eye of, of Zoran, so to speak. How do you keep that balance? Because that can be a fine line for some people, right? And it's just like, yeah. I'll let you answer the question.
Look, I think AI is a tool. And we've got to work out what is it that we want to actually do, so it comes back to this thing about filtering. I'm very much about filtering. So when you and I went to school, we would go to school and the teacher would say, what's the capital of China? And you'd go, Bangkok. And they'd go, no. And you'd probably go up and put out your hand and get the smack across the hand with a ruler or something. And then you'd go home. And then the next day you'd come back and they'd go, what's the capital of Bangkok? What's the capital of China? And you'd be like, oh, I don't know. And you get smacked again. And this would happen over and over until eventually you knew the capital of China. Whereas nowadays, I can literally go on my Amazon at home. I can pick up my phone and just say, hey, what's the capital of China? or I can type it in, and it'll come up and it'll say, here's the capital of China. Do you want to see a camera from the tower? Do you want to hear the name in like every country, every language humanly possible? There'll be like millions of searches. Now, people have never taught us how to filter that information. We've actually only ever been taught how to learn the information. So especially for older people, we kind of feel like, I really need to know this stuff. I need to know exactly how that works and exactly why that works. Lots of younger people are actually much better at tech than we are, purely because they give an app 3 seconds, and if it doesn't work, they basically shut down the app, or they'll turn off their phone and turn it back on again. We, as older people, will go, oh, I must have done something wrong. There's definitely something that I've done to this app, and we'll spend like 5 minutes trying to fix the app, right? Whereas young people will just go, oh, it didn't work in 3 seconds? Bang, I'll go just let me download another one and try another one. Okay, because they've learned, they're better at filtering than we are, but we still have, as a society, haven't mastered filtering. And that's where AI has come in, and it's really beautiful. So now you go into Google and you do a search, it actually filters it and it says, hey, this is probably the answer that you're looking for. You don't have to go through a million different ones to find the answer. So I think what we need to do is look at your business and work out, where is it that you actually need help? If you need help with accounting, we've got an AI. We can help you with that. If you need help with sorting out your emails, there's an AI that can help you there. If you need AI, content, if you're struggling with creating content, there's an AI that can do that. If you need to, if you've got calls coming in and you're missing the calls, there's an AI that can help you with that. So don't jump in and try and look at every AI and then try and work out how it can fit into your business. Look at your business. What do you need? Find that one.
So authenticity and credibility and client base. So if you're starting out, when's the best time for someone to reach out to connect with you? Is it when they're already wheels up and they're in the air, where they start, mapping and then, budgeting, what's things going to look like? Is it, if the idea is pragmatic, they're about to launch, if they're uh, making furry coats for mice, better be a circus somewhere, right?
I love that
When
business idea. Furry coats for mice.
yeah, they don't come equipped already.
Okay. Look, I think in any of the stages, ideally, I find a lot of people have started business and they've been running for a while, but they haven't actually got that long-term goal. They haven't worked out their big picture yet, where they actually want to be. And so their messaging that they're putting out into the world is not quite right. The avatar that they're looking for is not quite right. So they're all over the place. And that might be from somebody that's just starting out or somebody that's actually been running for a while and hasn't been successful. So lots of people that, are in business, we know that only sort of 16% of businesses actually fail, actually survive. Something like 84% of businesses fail in the first 2 years. And that's because they haven't got their messaging right. They haven't got their ideal avatar. Who's their ideal person? And how can they make it sure that they actually talking to that person? And I'll just tell you a personal experience from my side. I help people create content. Okay. So I help people to create content that really resonates with their audiences. And so 1 week I was actually helping. I've built this, I've built an AI that does this, and I was actually working with a client, and I created content, and then I actually read them back a post that they would be using to put onto their socials, and the person started crying. And the first time it happened to me, I was a bit like taken aback, and I thought, oh, maybe they're just emotional. They're like an emotional kind of person. But in the same week, I spoke to a second person who also started crying. Okay. And that actually just really reinforced into me how powerful this is. Because what AI had done is, most of us are coaching ourselves 5 years ago, or, ourselves a couple of steps ago. And so this resonated because they'd given us all their language, right? And then it had gone in and actually, got the collective language from everybody, right? And then come up with some posts around that, which were so hard hitting to the people that they were like, wow, like that's talking directly to me. And that's when you realize how powerful, amazing, and dangerous AI is, because it can really invoke emotions in us.
Wow. When you're capitalizing on AI, obviously you'll need the source impression from the people. Either that or you show up with a bag of onions and start cutting them open. But assuming you're not doing that, so you got to get that person into the AI somehow. Not physically, obviously, but their operating style, for lack of better words. Is that something that you find pretty easy? Is it like do you spend a couple of weeks of having them play with the AI to get a pattern so that they get the tempo of the person?
I don't know if you've seen the latest trend going around, and I can send you the link, or if you go on my Facebook, it's just Louis Swart, and you'll see the prompt for it. But you can actually say to AI, "Hey, I'd like you to make an animation of me from all the information you already know about me." Okay, and you give it a picture, and it actually does a full animation. It does a full animation on you. I don't know if you've ever just asked ChatGPT or Claude or whoever you're using. Just ask them, what do they know about you? And you'll be fascinated what they actually know. What AI, it already, let's face it, AI is on your phone and it's listening to you. Facebook's listening to you. Google's listening to you. Apple's listening to you. All of them are listening to you. The devices we've got in our home are listening to us. Our tablets are listening to us. Your friend's phone is listening to you. When you go to a party and somebody else takes a picture, the facial recognition knows that you were there. Okay. Because people are like, oh, I don't take pictures at parties. And that's cool. But everyone else that's taking a picture, you literally, if you're coming up in that, it knows that you were there. So we're at that point where AI has got a really big database of us already. Okay. But we can actually just, and with most of them, I'll talk about GPT because, it's probably one of the first and one of the easiest. GPT, you can literally just click on the, if you go down to the bottom where you would normally type in text, you can just go on the right of that and there's a little white circle with little lines and you click on that and you can actually talk to it. So you can just talk to it and you can say, hey, I just want to tell you about my life. These are my values. This is what I did when I was a child. This is what I've done now, etc. And I want you to ask me any questions for any extra information you need. And in the space of, on some of them, there's a time limit. So I think you can only talk to it for, I'm not exactly sure. It varies. Okay.
Yeah.
But, probably an hour or something, and then you run out of time on it. But you just talk to it and tell it about your life, and then you tell it about your life tomorrow. And then very soon, 2 or 3 days, and it knows everything about you. It knows your values, your relationships, your business, your ethos. It's got all that. And then the content that it can produce for you is beyond what anything that you could expect, imagine now. But it's still a tool, so people, to me, it's always interesting that people will say, oh, my AI, it's just always agrees with me. It's terrible. It always agrees with me. And I just hate it because it always agrees with me. And I go, well, have you ever told it not to agree with you? Have you said, I don't want you to agree. I actually want you to be the most argumentative AI ever, right? And I want you to disagree with me. And then I want you to, argue with me, find counter arguments. Everything I tell you, I want you to completely disagree. And people go, no, I've never done that. And I'm like, well, this is a thing. I did an AI course for a class, and I said, okay, we're all going to write the story on Little Red Riding Hood. And everyone's like, yeah, that's cool. And I'm like, okay, so now if we all just typed in, tell me the story of Little Red Riding Hood, it's going to come up with a generic story because it doesn't know if we're 5 or 50 or it doesn't really know. But if before that we put in and we say, hey, I love fairy tales, I love rainbows and unicorns and the princess rides off into the sunset, tell me the story about Little Red Riding Hood. And the next person puts in, like, I really love Saw. I love Saw in our horror movies, where the person just gets gored and, tell me the Little Red Riding Hood story. And I said, I want you to each do it and put in your own Little Red Riding Hood story. And the results were amazing. One girl put in Andrew Tate. She goes, like, I want you to be Andrew Tate and follow all his stuff and then write the Little Red Riding Hood story, And it just showed how it's so, AI is so malleable for what we want. But we're treating it almost like it's a stand on its own thing. We don't treat it like it's a tool that we can actually use.
Iron Bridge. What's the story behind the name? I forgot to ask that earlier. The way you've written it is different. It's not like the word iron and bridge as in to cross over a bridge. Fill the gap. What's the story behind it?
So when I started, I wanted a name that I could put on all socials. I wanted a name that I could use anywhere. And so Iron Bridge, I actually tried to get Iron Bridge, but obviously Iron Bridge the name was gone. And so I did just put the J instead, because a lot of the English words, if you think of the word empty, okay, most of the letters aren't even required. You could just have EMT, is empty. Like, we don't need the P and the T and the Y, and we don't need all those extra words, right? Or the word Q, like we could just have the letter Q. Like, we've got all these other words for some obscure reason. And so it was really just that. I just made it slightly different so that I could get on all the socials. But the idea is that I'm trying to bridge the gap between where you are and where you want to be. And that's why I'm so focused on where do you want to be in 5 years? Let's really get that clear as to what that is.
Have you found that there's a particular habit that helps an entrepreneur starts capitalizing on it, that helps them, that doubles their gains in managing their business?
I think the delegation is a really, really, really big one. Okay. Because if you don't delegate, you end up doing everything and it's very difficult to grow. And generally, you need to delegate before you think it's time to delegate. So, a lot of people that are working in business are actually so in their business that they can't work on their business. They're not looking at the big picture. They're not looking at who's my ideal client. What can I give what does my ideal client actually want? Because they're so busy just trying to manage the day-to-day stuff. And I was actually talking to an accountant just before this. And I know with me, when it came time to put on a bookkeeper, I was like, oh, it's going to cost me extra cash. Hey? It's going to cost me a lot of extra money to put on a bookkeeper because I was putting it on somebody in Australia. And I was like, I can still manage it even though I'm working till 2 a.m. and doing this. And I don't know if there's enough work for them to do it. And then as soon as I put on a bookkeeper, they were busy 8 hours a day. And they were catching up on all the stuff that I hadn't done. And they were like, reconciling and doing all that. And suddenly I was freed up to go, whoa, okay, I've got extra time. What am I going to do with this extra time? So, obviously, if you're just going to use the extra time watching Netflix, you're not going to benefit. But if so then I started using the extra time to go, how can I bring more technology into the business? How can I grow the business? How can I, get better at the sales? How can I get better on my socials? And so then the business jumped a whole level. And I found that every time we employed somebody, don't get me wrong, every now and then, hey, we all make bad hires every now and then, but worst case, you're just back where you were. You're back where you were, you don't go all the way back to start.
Speaking of new hires, do you go through is AI, if growing up with it, you'll know or have a sense of it. But if you've never grown up with it, almost like if you've never seen a car before and someone says, okay, get behind the wheel, stuff, there's a bit of training required. Is there anything that you're either finding from entrepreneurs then that gets them kind of spun up to speed? And when they go to hire somebody, to make sure that person has the capacity, And I'll even reframe the question from capacity. Can be capable, but not there yet. In other words, they have the brain power to do it. Just they haven't been trained.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, we're getting to the point now where AI is getting so much easier, you know. Stuff like, you before, if you were in an Excel spreadsheet and you wanted to do a formula and it was a little bit more complicated, you kind of had to know how to do it, or you had to find somebody to know how to do it. And now you can just use something like Gemini and say, hey, please look at my screen. I'm trying to do this. And you can talk to it in normal language. Just say, I'm trying to do this. And it will actually create the formula for you. It'll tell you what the formula should be. So it's not like you need to do the programming. Before, the whole realm of doing it was programming, and you could sit there behind the guys and they were putting in exclamation marks and all sorts of weird stuff that meant things to them. Now we can just talk to it, and I think that's the biggest thing. Like, a lot of people are still using ChatGPT like Google. So they're asking it a question and then asking it a question. Ask it to ask you questions. Say, hey, listen, I'd really like you to find out about me. Ask me 20 questions that you'd like to know about me. An example is if you want to write a book about your life. So you want to write a book about your life, you just say, hey, I want to write a book about my life. From what you know, what do you think 10 good chapters would be? And it'll say, well, these are the 10 good chapters. And you say, okay, I want you to ask me 10 stories, all right, about each chapter until you convinced that you've got, enough information to be able to write a reasonable chapter. And it will ask you a chapter. It'll ask you a story. Tell me about when you were a kid, Bernie. And you tell it about when you were a kid. Tell me about the most embarrassing thing that's happened to you as a kid. And you tell it the most embarrassing. What was the most pleasurable time you had as a kid? And then it writes the story. So it's not like we have to know all this super technical terms. We've just got to, now we really just got to use our imagination, and you've got this incredible resource that can do literally anything. You can go on ChatGPT and you can actually click on the three little, the little white buttons on the right. You click on the little buttons and you can click on the camera. You can currently do this on your phone. Every single person that's listening to this. So you can go on your phone, you go onto ChatGPT, which is a free app. There is a paid version, but the free, and you click on the three buttons. It comes up, you click on the camera, and the actual camera comes on. And what I want you to do is I want you to go into your kitchen and point just your phone, your normal camera, point it around the kitchen and say, hey, ChatGPT, I want to make a coffee. Can you help me? It will tell you where to find the cups. It will tell you which cups you should use. And then you can point it at the pantry, and it will tell you what the coffee is. Okay. You can ask it questions like, what do I do now? And it'll say, pour in the water, can you tell me when to stop? And you can do this in English, and then you can just suddenly say, hey, can you just tell me how to do that in French? And it'll tell you how to do that in French. Or if you do talk French, it'll just talk French to you and help you with the rest of the directions in French. This is already available, or you can just point it at something and say, hey, does this go with this? Does this component, would this component fit into my computer? Or how do I use this? Or, hey, how can I get another one of these? Where could I actually go and look for that? That's already available on your phone for free. So we don't have to be super technical anymore. We can just literally use the resources that are there.
As you're describing this, and it's like interpolation. In other words, you have a series of data points, or if you're doing a graph, you'll have a series of points. So you can always point in. But extrapolation, do you foresee that as an opportunity? If I'm sitting there as a business going, okay, I'm making widgets, help me produce this, get my comms out there so that I have messaging to clients. We're humming along, and will it help me look at a product and say, okay, let's say we're doing the 20 questions.
Mm-hmm.
Can it help me extrapolate going into the next generation? It may not be able to come up with the idea like, the mouse jackets should be leather jackets now, right? But can it help me see missed opportunities, or other avenues going, listen, based on what's happening right now and with, let's say, tariffs, doesn't matter where you are, tariffs are just being swung around like, a cat over the head. Is
Yeah.
there a way to look at something going adverse event? What's the opportunity? Can it help bring that out?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, and if if you have got a competitor who's doing better than you can literally go in and say, hey, point it at their website, point it at their socials and go, please look at this and tell me why they're doing better than what I am. Look at this and tell me, where there's missed opportunities, where I could be better. Or, here's the top 5. So I've got virtual assistants, and I go in and I say, here's the top 5 companies doing virtual assistants. Here's me. Can you please look at them and tell me if you can see any gaps? Where's the gaps that they're not seeing that the customer wants to, that customers need? And it will come back and give us those. Another thing is, when we do coaching, I'll give you an example, this is a real life example. Okay. So if I was doing coaching with you, I would have a Fathom recording running in the background, and the Fathom recording, at the end of the coaching session, the Fathom recording would send me a full transcription of the meeting. I then have a prompt which says, please tell me if Bernie is a big picture or a detailed thinker. Please do a disc profile on Bernie. Okay, please tell me the stuff that I spoke to, how I could have brought across my message better to Bernie. Please tell me if there was any challenges that were raised that I didn't actually pick up on. Please tell me how I could have sold better to Bernie. Okay, please tell me the words that will inspire Bernie and the words that will demotivate Bernie. Okay. And I can even, I'm in the health space, so I can say, can you please write me a 5-minute meditation or a 10-minute meditation that I could do as a gift to Bernie for actually, helping me with this. And it will come back and it'll give me your disc profile, give me your big picture, small picture. It'll give me exactly how I could sell better to you. And it's actually scary how accurate it can actually be. And it picks up stuff that I had a client, and this client's a marathon runner. He's run a whole lot of marathons. Now, I'm not much of a marathon runner, I'm not a marathon. I'm like a potential walker, That's kind of my level of I'm working towards the 7,000 steps. That's my level of thing. But I did a coaching program with him. And then at the end, I did an offer and it wasn't successful. And then I went into GPT and I was like, how could I have done that better? And it said, well, he's a marathon guy and, he's run 80-kilometer marathons. You really should have brought that whole thing into the pitch at the end. Somebody like you that's run 80 marathons, this will be really easy for you to accomplish. Or other things that it said in your pitch, you've said, we're going to do this and we can do that and I can do this for you and I can help you here. And it's gone, this person is a detailed thinker, but they're all about trying things. So your wording should have been, let's try and see how we can grow your socials together, as opposed to I can grow your socials for you, And so it's just about the wording, but it already knows that. So imagine this is what's freely available to you and me for free on our phones. Imagine what big corporations have got in order to persuade us to buy their products, or what governments have got in order to persuade us to go this way or that way. It's from that side, it's really, really scary, So, but I think for small businesses, the amazing potential with what we can do with AI at the moment.
Louis, if someone says, hey, listen, this has been great. I want me some of that. How do they find you and how far afield can they be?
Well, I coach people all over the world. So the most common countries that I coach in is obviously Australia, America, UK. But I've got clients I've got a whole lot of clients in France, and Mauritius and wherever. So the easiest way is for them to reach out to me. I've got a LinkedIn and I've got a Facebook. So you can either go under my name, so Louis Swart or Coach Louis Swart, or under Ironbridge. If you go under Ironbridge, so it's just IRONBRIJ. I'm on all the different social media platforms. And just reach out. You can reach out. You can have a free 30-minute coffee, and we can literally go through like your specific things and see how I can specifically help you. But one program that I do have that I'm doing at the moment is where I actually work with people for an hour. I literally work with you for an hour, and I create 6 months worth of content. And you can go on and see the reviews and everything. I've got heaps of reviews and people are loving it. And because this is a big thing that we have, we go, I'm going to post more consistent for my business, and then you get into bed. And I'm looking at my setting my alarm for tomorrow, and I go, oh my goodness, it's Wednesday. I'm supposed to post on Wednesday, and I'm like, oh, what am I going to post? What content should I post? And then do I get out of bed? Do I get out of my pajamas and then try and turn the lights on and try and create some content? And it becomes this real messy thing. And then you're like, oh, I'll just do it next week. And so then you don't have that consistency. But I can actually work with somebody for an hour. And I create 6 months of solid content for them, where they can actually schedule the content 6 months in advance, and they can put content in between, but they've literally got 6 months worth of content created. And we use things like we're using the NLP, we're using all this mindset stuff as well as using the business stuff. And the big things are we're trying to work out who's the ideal avatar, who's the ideal client, what's the service that they offer. What's the top 10 fears and frustrations and dreams and desires? Because that's super, super important. We want to take them from, I'm really scared of this to, I'm frustrated because everyone says they can help me, but no one's helping me, to I'd really like this. And then to why do I really want that? And so we actually work all that path out. I give them ideas for sort of 10,000 videos. I create stories to explain their concept. So I'll give you a quick example. You should delegate. Everybody should delegate, because if you've got a team around you, it's much easier for you to be solid in business than if you're working on your own. And now that story you may or may not remember, that idea, but there was an old man, and this old man was dying, and he had 3 sons. And so what he did was he said his sons were always fighting, and he needed them to just be they needed to work together. And so he got them all to go out into the yard and get 2 sticks. And they came back with their 2 sticks. And he said, okay, first of all, I want you to break the first stick. And so they all broke the first stick proudly, and just. Then he said, okay, what I want you to do is get the second stick, and I want you to tie all 3 sticks together. And I want you to, tie them with rope. And then he said to the youngest, okay, I want you to break that. And obviously he couldn't break it. It was much thicker now, and the second son couldn't break it, and the third son couldn't break it. And he said, the moral is, if you work on your own, people are going to be able to break you, and you're going to fail. But if you work as a team, nobody's going to be able to break you. And you've got, because of the support, you've got much less chance of failing. Now, tomorrow, you're not going to remember the first thing I told you. But you might see a stick and go, oh, I remember that story about the stick and the 3 sticks tied together. And so we help you to create 10 stories like that around your business, around the concepts. Because lots of the stuff we do it's lovely, but it's a concept, and people can't really get that concept into a solid idea in their mind. And so this is just helping them with that. And then what I do is I create 20 Facebook posts and LinkedIn posts. We create hooks because, you really need a really good hook for your message. Your hook is so important. You got 3 seconds to get their attention. If you don't get their you've watched people on phones. They go like this. And sometimes you're sitting next to them and you'll go, that's a really good video. But they've already gone past it because it didn't give them a dopamine hit within 3 seconds. So we work on how do we get you 20 really good hooks so that, people are going to stop and actually look at your purple elephant and go, whoa, why is there a purple elephant there? What the hell's going on? Okay. And then I help you create a lead magnet. And the lead magnet is just really something that you can give away. So, in order to build trust, we say, hey, let me give you something for free in exchange potentially for your email address or, for you booking a call with me, whatever that might be. And so I create all of that. And then I do a 20-minute interview with you. And I interview you about your business for 20 minutes. And then my team breaks it up into shorts and we give that back to you and you put those shorts on your socials. So it's a phenomenal offer. It's worth about $2,200. I charge $197 for it. Unfortunately, it takes a lot of my time and you get to work directly with me. So I can only do sort of 5 a month. So the spots go really quickly, but we'll put a link in for it if you're interested and want to do that. Like I say, imagine if you've got 6 months of content. You don't have to think about your content for the next, till July. You don't have to worry about it. Your socials are pumping till July.
Louis, I want to say thank you so much to our Knack for Business listeners for listening to us today. And listen, if you want to know more about how to eat that elephant or how to make 3-stick sandwiches, reach out to Louis, because you know what? The whole thing is to have that memorable piece latch in. AI is a tool. It helps you deliver the resource. And the other thing is you don't have to do it all by yourself. So Louis comes kind of a Swiss Army knife of moments here of, epiphanies that come into one gelling moment as make you more successful.
Everything you heard today is for educational purposes only. It's not professional advice. Before you act on anything, talk to a certified expert in your area. Your accountant, your lawyer, someone who knows your situation. We share perspectives. You make the decisions. Want more? Head over to blog.knack4business.com, packed with practical episodes on AI, marketing, leadership, and growth. No fluff, just the good stuff. Subscribe while you're there. Until next time, keep building.